From Diamond Pharmacy Services, this is PodcastRx, a monthly show that takes you behind the counter of the nation's largest correctional pharmacy provider. We bring you conversations with pharmacists, nurses, managers, and other Diamond staff about the topics and issues we see in corrections, long-term care, and community health settings. Our chats aren't limited to purely pharmacy topics, and they aren't strictly clinical either. So if you're a healthcare provider or just enjoy healthcare podcasts, we think you'll enjoy this show. If your job is to sell pharmacy service to long-term care facilities, how do you change your approach when your clients suddenly aren't accessible to you? And on top of that, how do you adapt your pitch when those same clients are facing one of the biggest crises to ever hit their industry? These are questions that Nick McFerron, Regional Healthcare Sales Executive for Diamond, was faced with for the better part of a year. He joins us for a look back at his pandemic experiences in sales and long-term care. We talk the importance of improvisation, customer service, and being a resource instead of a provider. And we also discuss the ways Diamond has stepped up service to long-term care facilities in the wake of the pandemic. I'm Adam Campbell, and welcome to PodcastRx. Well, I want to welcome back to PodcastRx Nick McFerron. Nick, he was on one of the earliest episodes of this podcast, episode 3 actually, and it's great to have him back after so long. Nick, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here with you guys. Thanks for having me.
Of course. For those meeting Nick for the first time, he's an account executive within our long-term care division. Now, Nick, I've always known your title to be account executive, but I believe that title's changed recently. If you don't mind, could you give us that new title along with a quick summary of what you do?
Absolutely. Yeah, so we actually added a few more words to the title. It's called Regional Healthcare Sales Executive. And the reason for the change is that we're now going to be calling on all long-term care facilities, for me in Pennsylvania, so skilled nursing facilities, personal care homes, and assisted living.
Yeah, and before you just did personal care and assisted living, the skilled homes were separate.
That's right,
So,
yep.
How do you feel about that new focus?
I'm excited for the new challenge. There's a lot of opportunity out there. Diamond is a growing company as ever, and I'm excited to kind of be part of that growth, especially in the skilled sector in Pennsylvania.
Yeah. And as it stands, Diamond is still Pennsylvania's largest independently owned long-term care pharmacy.
That's right.
So certainly a great opportunity for you to get out there and spread the gospel, so to speak.
Definitely, yeah. I'm excited to be out there doing it.
Well, we certainly wish you the best of luck and success with that new role and
appreciate it.
Everything. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, Nick, we've been on these last few podcast episodes, we've been talking with quite a few Diamond folks about how this COVID-19 pandemic has affected their everyday work in these past 18 months. Now, unlike some of the folks we've talked to, for instance, we just had an episode with Judy Tomiko, our head respiratory therapist. We've talked with Audra, the manager of medical supply, Debbie Yakubowski, our infection control coordinator. Unlike their work, which, of course, expanded and they did the same thing, but it maybe got more chaotic in some ways or whatever. Mm-hmm. Your job as an account executive in long-term care, at least the way you knew how to do it, I would say that came to a halt. At least having an office next door to you and talking to you,
definitely.
Your job changed a lot. And instead of it kind of getting more chaotic, it almost slowed to a crawl.
Definitely. It definitely changed the way that we approached our position at that point. It was very early on in the pandemic. Of course, there was a lot of unknown, everywhere you look nationally. Not anyone really knew what was going on very early on there. So, we definitely switched from a sales role to definitely more of a supportive role with our customers. There wasn't going to be a lot of movement, so to speak, with any of the prospects. People were just trying to stay above water, mm-hmm. and just take care of their residents. So we knew from our perspective that we had to change our role and become much more supportive than anything else.
Of course. Now, in those very early days, what was the improvisation like for you? I've talked about that improvisation with
Right.
the other people we've talked about. What was it like in particular in the sales world for long-term care?
Yeah, so we had to, get creative. We wanted to stay in front of the customer as much as possible. We had to get creative, especially like with you guys. We had a bunch of different marketing initiatives like sending out, snack boxes and just sending out little reminders that, hey, we're here for you. And definitely, like I said, a much more supportive role. I was still making calls, but I was making calls to make sure that they had everything they needed from us. So, could have been calls about PPE to make sure if there was PPE available that they had, that we were sending it. I even remember at one point we were all out of masks. We didn't have any face shields available for sale. So I found a gentleman in Homer City. This was back when everything was locked down. This gentleman had several 3D printers and he was making shields and he wasn't charging anyone for them. He was just doing it strictly as a volunteer basis and just donating them to people that needed them. And we were able to get him set up with one of the personal care homes here in Indiana. And he sent over, I think, like 40 or 80 face masks because they were all out and we were all out. And so at one point I found myself just kind of like facilitating things like that as well. So
yeah,
again, just much more supportive and more customer service oriented than anything else.
Of course, and customer service is one of the pillars of this company,
right?
For sure. So imagining to get to switch over, I want to say switch over because that's always part of what you do, but really focus mostly on that, I'm sure was a really rewarding experience in a lot of ways.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I love helping people and trying to make a difference, whatever way I can. So yeah, definitely rewarding.
Yeah. And I do want to add, when Nick mentioned Homer City, for anyone listening outside of our immediate area, Homer City is a town just a couple miles to the south, more than a couple, but yeah, just a little bit south here in the greater Indiana community of all things. And that speaks to the local kindness of people around here. Yeah,
I think he was a school teacher that, of course, they were out of school and he had all this know-how and a couple of 3D printers and just started making these shields and then it just took off from there. They were sending him more of the material that those printers use. Mm-hmm. And he was able to just keep pumping these things out and get them out to the people that needed them. So it was very cool.
Yeah. And I'm sure being that you are in the long-term care world, and it was known right from the start that this pandemic is going to be really hard on these homes, these facilities. So I'm sure you saw, beyond that, I'm sure you saw a lot of other acts of generosity that were pretty inspiring as well.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. That one definitely sticks out, but you were seeing all different types of companies, not just pharmacies, but other companies that are in healthcare, just switching to that supportive role, taking lunches and just trying to make sure that the healthcare professionals were being appreciated because it was such a hard time on them. And it still is, but those early days in COVID were just, very hard on the healthcare professionals.
Going back to strictly sales. Now, of course, you did the right thing. You got out in a supportive role, you and your colleagues. Now, of course, you still have that job to do in sales. So how did you adapt your tact, given the gravity of what administrators and people in those facilities were facing?
Yeah, I mean, it was more, you're trying to be supportive, but at the same time, you are trying to figure out what their current situation is. Mm-hmm. And after the initial onslaught of COVID came and went, then there definitely were facilities out there that were looking for a pharmacy change. So, you're trying to be sensitive to the situation, but you still have to ask sometimes those hard questions. What is your current situation? Are you having problems with your pharmacy now? And then the sales cycle kind of goes on from there.
To follow up on that, when you did have to ask the quote unquote tough questions in this context,
sure,
how would you say they were greeted?
I think if you ask them in the right way, then they're met with respect, I guess, for lack of better terms. As long as they know that you're trying to help them and not trying to sell them something they don't need or trying to cram something down their throat. That's not a good way of putting it, but basically you understand their current situation and their needs, and if they have something that you think you can help with, then you try to convey that to them in the clearest way possible.
Yeah. And no doubt you did a great job with that.
Oh, thank you.
I do want to ask, though, now that you've had 18 months of this experience, when did things loosen up? When were you able to go back into communities and start having personal connection with administrators and staff again?
Yeah, I would say like early to mid-spring is when things started to open back up.
Just vaccines, of course.
Yeah, the vaccines got out there. Diamond played a very big role in getting those vaccines out there. And yeah, we were able to start having face-to-face interactions more and more. So it got back pretty much back to normal. And I was thinking about this the other day. I mean, I think sales is one of the only professions that I do believe still needs to be face-to-face, at least in this context. Like if you're buying a pack of gum, that's different. But this type of sales process, I think it's best suited face-to-face. I mean, the virtual thing is nice. You can definitely communicate information virtually, but there's that personal touch that we go after here at Diamond, and I know a lot of other companies go after too. Personal touch and customer service are the two things that we try to be the best at.
Well, right, and especially in a healthcare company like ours, and on top of that, an industry like long-term care, which has a lot of warmth associated with it. I mean, you're taking care of somebody's mother, their grandmother, grandfather, you name it, and so. Yes, that personal touch is so important. Right. Not in all aspects of that.
Right. So. And we're a resource for not only the administrator or the person running the facility, but also the family members, are able to call us. I get multiple calls every week from family members asking about, billing, or they had a question about their mom or dad's medication. And, if I can't get the answer, I get them the answer. Sometimes I have to talk to a pharmacist or someone in billing, but I think that's one of the things that really sets us aside from our competitors or from our other pharmacies out there, is that, we have that personal touch and that customer service level that is hard to meet.
Yeah. Did you find that you were getting way more calls of that nature from families and caregivers like that throughout the pandemic? Did that go up?
I would say that about stayed the same. Okay. I didn't notice a big increase in talking to families, but yeah, I was reaching out a lot more, just to make sure that they were happy with what was going on pharmacy wise. And then, like I said, PPE was a very big thing and still is. And with us being a medical supplier, we had it available. And yeah, but I didn't necessarily notice a huge increase there.
So in this entire, from March 2020 to now, Nick, what would you say the most noteworthy change for you to get used to in the way that you do your job? What would you say that is, the most noteworthy change?
I would just go back to the lack of face-to-face communication. The face-to-face interactions and the relationships are what drive sales. And when you don't have that, it's hard to develop the new relationships with people when you don't have that face-to-face. But yeah, I think that's the biggest change, is just trying to adapt and come up with new ways to create those relationships when you can't go, to a conference and shake someone's hand, or you can't, walk in and create that relationship face-to-face. So that's definitely the biggest change sales-wise.
Yeah. But as you said, you were able to compensate for that with the care gestures and things like that, which, no doubt left a good impression and
I think
helped
so,
that along. And not from a cynical perspective. I mean that, a genuine caring, and showing what we're about. And, it was really, on one hand, I'm sure that's really great to be able to have done that regardless of pandemic or not.
For sure. Yeah.
To kind of change the way you do things in that particular way.
Yeah, for sure. It was good to be in a supportive role, and I still see it that way. I mean, that's something that we'll take on. I'm sure my colleagues feel the same way. Like, we're here as a resource for our customers. So whatever it is they need, we try to get it done for them, in whatever way possible.
Remember the Diamond Drug Information Center? That group of expert pharmacists who help Diamond customers with their medication questions? Well, I'm here to tell you that they're a thing of the past, but not in a bad way. No. The Drug Info Center has a new name and a new mission. We're proud to introduce the Office of Pharmacy Therapeutics and Integrated Clinical Services, or Optics. Instead of offering just drug information, the pharmacists of Optics are moving their services closer to direct patient care. Whether it's through collaborative formulary management, medication therapy management, or individual patient care plans, the Optics team is ready to integrate their clinical pharmacy expertise into the day-to-day operations of medical teams in corrections and long-term care, and they'll continue to offer the same drug information resources they've provided in the past. To get a clearer view of Optics and its mission, go to diamondpharmacy.com/Optics team to learn more. Now back to PodcastRx.
Back here on PodcastRx, talking to Nick McFerron. So, Nick, I did want to ask, we just talked about your very personal experience in sales and how you had to change the way you did things during the pandemic. But I wanted to ask more on an institutional level and what you saw kind of out in the industry. How, in your view, how did the pandemic affect how, when you were working with primarily personal care and assisted living facilities at the time, how did you notice ways that it was changing how they looked at pharmacy providers and what they wanted to find in a pharmacy provider? Could you tell anything specific there?
Well, I mean, definitely the vaccine was a big piece to that puzzle. Very early on, initially, it was CVS and Walgreens that were out there administering, but then it became so that other pharmacies could get supplies, and that's when we got involved. And I'll have to say that Deborah Melito headed that up here at Diamond, and she did an absolute awesome job getting that out there. It was a logistical challenge to get all those doses out there, and get a bunch of pharmacists here certified to be injection pharmacists, and they got it done. And it was very impressive, and they got the doses out there. So I just got to give a shout out to Deborah.
Yeah, and Deborah is a frequent guest on this show, most recently doing a vaccine Q&A for us back in the early summer, I believe. And yes, we did. That's we talked to her rather about the Strike Force Immunization Team, I believe is the name of it. Yeah. Definitely.
And they're still going at it strong now with the booster shots being approved. So
yeah.
It's nice to be able to provide that service to our customers.
For sure. Yeah. And the vaccine, of course, anyone listening would be like, well, that's got to be the obvious thing you would associate with pharmacy. But
right.
I wanted to ask that too, because there may be things you're not seeing. Of course, like you said, CVS, Walgreens, that was that federal program to initially get people going. But I know that one question I asked Deborah on a previous podcast was about, well, what about independents like us? When are we going to get into the mix? And eventually we did. And I'm sure facilities, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I'm sure they're happier to deal with the pharmacy they've been dealing with, the independent they've known for years to do that rather than
I think it was
out of state.
Yeah, it was just a logistical problem at first, and then we were able to get in, like you said, and get a supply, and then it was just from the facility perspective, they would rather have us come in with that customer service and that personal touch versus like a Walgreens or a CVS.
Right. And you're talking about, some of these customer relationships we have are going back decades. And it would be a kind of a no-brainer. I would assume, I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but I would assume if you're an administrator of that's a no-brainer to want to work with that pharmacy that you've trusted for all those years. Yeah. So of course you talked about the lack of in-person engagement being, a hard thing to get used to in those early days and middle period of the pandemic. So you were just at the Pennsylvania Assisted Living Association trade show. It's in Harrisburg. PALA is the organization there. And that was just the very end of September, a week or two ago.
Yep.
So correct me if I'm wrong. Was this the first major in-person trade show you attended since all this began?
It was, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm curious, you were out there I'm sure that was, you were out there in Harrisburg. I'm sure that was the case for a few of the attendees, or maybe a lot, that this first time they were getting back in touch with anyone. What was the general mood like among the people that you were talking to at the conferences?
Yeah, I mean, the general mood was good. I think people were happy to be out there.
Yeah,
like,
that's good.
For lack of better words, getting back to normal. But yeah, the mood was good, and we had some really good booth traffic, and spoke to some people that knew but hadn't seen in a couple years. So yeah, it was generally it was a very good show and good time to be out there.
That's good to hear. A quick internet search will turn up plenty of articles about difficulties in long-term care at this time. Staffing, vaccine hesitancy, things like that. Mm-hmm. But I guess I wanted to ask you, and you already kind of touched on this, but what are some of the positives that are going on out there in that world that casual observers might not see related to all the headlines, the things you generally hear?
Yeah, I mean, I think like one positive is, it's easy to focus on like the negatives, like you said, vaccine hesitancy. But, for the most part, other than staffing issues, which just seem to be across the board in any industry, you still have people that are coming to work and that are taking care of those residents that need care. Yeah, I mean, you do hear about the staffing shortages, but if you talk to administrators, they still do have good people coming to work, getting the job done and taking care of the residents that need the care. Another thing is it's amazing to me that there's hesitancy with the vaccine, but the vaccine does work, and a large portion of the long-term care residents have taken the vaccine, and it's working. It's protecting them. So I think that's a job well done for everyone was involved with developing that vaccine.
Yeah, I agree. And now you have the boosters coming out, an additional layer of protection.
For sure. Yep.
Besides vaccines, what opportunities has the pandemic given to long-term care pharmacy providers to step up their game? What other ways can long-term care pharmacy providers step up and deliver for long-term care customers? Yeah,
I mean, I think even it's kind of a recurring theme here, but being even more of a resource for those facilities. And Deborah Melito is a big part of that, and her team, both educating staff and residents and family members about the benefits of the vaccine. We also have our exchange technicians. These are the people that go out, and every month they'll bring medications to the facility, and they'll actually go through their medication carts and change things out and make sure everything is kosher and everything looks good. They're a monthly resource for the facilities as well. So yeah, to answer your question, I think, again, just upping that supportive role, doing whatever we can when it comes to both vaccines and PPE and medical supply, and of course being the best pharmacy provider that we can. So taking into account all those customer service issues that we need to, and just being the best pharmacy provider possible.
Yeah. And out of all those things you just talked about, what would you say is the most standout feature
of Diamond right now?
Yeah,
I would have to. Right now, it's the fact that I call it on demand, but we're doing these COVID boosters, very, very quickly and very efficiently. I think we have about a 2-week turnaround time, so we can get out to somebody and get them boosters within a couple weeks. And again, just the increased customer service and the personal touch. Yeah, I mean, I keep saying that, but I think that's so important.
That is important.
Yeah.
And those these booster clinics that you mentioned, is this over our entire coverage area? Is this throughout Pennsylvania, Ohio?
It is. Yep. Yeah, we're Pennsylvania, Ohio for right now. But that's keeping them busy. It's quite the undertaking.
Right. But the results are, you can't.
Yeah.
You can't quantify how important that is.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I do want to kind of close up here, Nick, by getting a little back to the personal questions. So I want to ask, like, as a salesperson in long-term care, what would you say the biggest professional lessons you've taken away from this experience are?
I would say the biggest would be you have to be adaptable or adaptive to your environment. So everything, and this goes for anyone, COVID changed our lives forever, and you have to adapt and figure out new ways to do business. So yeah, that, and just I call it emotional intelligence, but just knowing when to ask people those tough questions and how to do it properly. And I'm not saying I always do it properly, but I think that as long as you can have that awareness, then that's a very good professional goal.
Absolutely is. You talked about your title change at the beginning. What lies ahead for Nick in the next 18 months?
Yeah, very excited to, again, get out into that skilled market and learn some new faces there. And the possibilities are endless. Diamond is a growing company, and we're a strong company. We're under great leadership, and I'm just excited for the future.
Well, we're excited for you, Nick, and I want to thank you once again for being on PodcastRx with us.
I appreciate it.
And the door's always open. So hope you'll come back again.
Yeah, I'd love to.
This podcast features conversations with healthcare professionals. Their statements and opinions discussed herein are for informational purposes only. This podcast should not be considered professional medical advice and should not be used as a substitute for the advice of an appropriately qualified and licensed healthcare professional. Therefore, listeners must not rely on the statements made herein.
PodcastRx is a production of Diamond Pharmacy Services, the nation's largest correctional pharmacy provider. Catch our new episodes on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Please rate the show and leave us a review. And if you have a topic you'd like to hear about on the show, or you'd like to share your thoughts on an episode, you can email us at podcastrx@diamondpharmacy.com.